I was born on the Clyde coast, and I have lived there all my life, and I don't think that a day has ever went by that I have not gazed over to the breathtaking island of Arran. There are days when it's hazy, there are days when it's completely hidden from view, and there are days when you feel you can reach out and touch it. It was a sharp spring morning, the roads were quiet. I arrived at the pier in plenty of time to catch the first ferry. As I gazed over at the sun-kissed Arran peaks, the smell of bacon and eggs wafted up from below, and as the clock struck 7, the large Calmac ferry eased from the quay and out into the Firth of Clyde. About the middle of the last century, the Firth of Clyde was a very busy stretch of water. We had the busy shipyards in the upper Clyde, the many ferry crossings joining the north to the south of the city. There were puffers and paddle steamers, freighters and fishing boats, tramps and liners, and then the ferry crossings to Kilcreggan, Dunoon, Rothsay, Millport and Arran.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention please. The vessel is now arriving in port.
I remember being at Rothsay as a boy, on holiday, watching steamer after steamer arrive at port. The harbour side was heaving. There was even an alcohol-free steamer from Glasgow, called the Ivanhoe, that advertised a pleasant sail without the ordinary rabble commonly on board Clyde steamers during the Glasgow Fair. Not an advert that would be permissible today. But the cheap Spanish package tours soon brought an end to this. Brodick's main selling point is the mountain views that surround it. There's an excellent direction board on a stone at the start of the promenade in Brodick, showing walks and pointing out features. I decided to head for the castle. I was going to take the Fisherman's Walk. Brodick is neither the largest village nor the capital, but it certainly offers the best services in the island. I headed down the busy main street. The village is well served with supermarkets, shops, hotels, pubs, B&Bs, pretty much every facility you would need. Ahead, the castle's sandstone towers and turrets looked quite impressive as they appeared above the forest on the lower flanks of Goat Fell. The present castle dates from the 19th century. It was the seat of the Dukes of Hamilton. It sits in wonderful grounds and belongs to the National Trust. Just beyond where the Blackwaterfoot Road turns off the main coastal road, we find the cart track for Glen Rosa. Just beyond this, we arrive at the sturdy bridge across the Garvalt. The breathtaking view of Chervore filled the skyline at the head of the Glen. A little further on, we find another small waterfall above a large granite boilerplate, where the fast-flowing Rosa water pours between a cluster of large boulders. Sannox is a lovely, clean, whitewashed little village. To the northwest of the village, dominating all around, we find the awesome and exhilarating Glen Sannox. About 100 yards along the road is the Corrie Golf Club. A tractor was being used to manicure the course, and as it headed up the glen, I rounded the corner and stood in amazement. This was probably the most beautiful and atmospheric course I have ever seen in my life. I walked back through the village and headed for Corrie. The village here was even more beautiful. The road continues from the harbour and swings round the headland at Ferry Rock. There's a war memorial on the rock at the headland. This is another fine spot to relax with an excellent view. And I gazed back towards the harbour and the way I come in. I took one last look towards the harbour and headed on. The road swings round here and past the Corrie Hotel. The peak in Holy Isle could be made out in the distance. Just offshore was a sculpture of a seal on a rock. As you enter Corrie from the south, a small side road leads off to the left. This is the start of the eastern route up Goat Fell, but it's also the access route to the tiny clachan of High Corrie. A ford greets you as you turn onto a little dead-end rutted road that winds up through the village. The view that greets you as you turn the corner is breathtaking. The main track stops at the highest house in the northern end of this little clachan. There are many hidden jewels like this on this wonderful island. I headed into Lochranza. The view from here is utterly breathtaking. The distillery was immediately below. The main road stretches towards the head of the loch, where a cluster of whitewashed houses are picked out. Sitting in the middle of the loch, on a curved grassy spit of land, is the imposing grey ruins of Lochranza Castle. It's not uncommon to find deer grazing here early in the morning. A rough road leads up to service the houses in the northeast of the village. I get a glimpse of the distillery in the valley below. In the 19th century, there were over 50 distilleries in the island, but most of them were illegal. A cluster of little yachts sit on the south side of the bay, protected by the spit of land where the castle stands. The view of the southwestern side of the village from here is quite stunning. From here, the castle dominates Lochranza. As I made my way up, I watched the Kintyre ferry docking below. The whitewashed little clachan of Catacall stands at the northern mouth of this steep-sided glen. The most notable feature is the striking little row of cottages lined along the roadside. They are known as the 12 Apostles. I left the bus at Dugarry Lodge, about halfway down the west coast. A little further down the road, we find the Druid Stone at Auchincar. This is the tallest standing stone in the island. This part of the island is rich in archaeological treasures, and I was now about to head for nearby Machrie Moor. This group of impressive upright sandstone pillars have been standing for over 4,000 years. Our next trip was to the King's Caves. This cave is reputed to be the legendary place where Robert the Bruce fled to after he murdered his rival John Comyn in Edinburgh. Legend also has it that this was where he watched the spider spinning a web. After many seemingly futile attempts, he eventually succeeded. The spider story actually came from the pen of Sir Walter Scott. There's an excellent view of Blackwater Foot from Kilpatrick Point. At the far end of Drumadoon Bay is the Doon, or Drumadoon Point, then the Sheskeen Golf Course, and the cluster of houses that make Blackwater Foot the largest settlement on the west coast of the island. About a mile beyond Blackwater Foot is the straggly village of Sheskeen, the only inland village in the island. The string road climbs up to the watershed at the top of the pass between Blackwater Foot and Brodick. The amazing Arran peaks once again appear from nowhere. It's a breathtaking sight. The main road dips down a steep hill and into the picturesque hamlet of Lagg, an idyllic little spot. The hotel here was built in 1791. Kilmory is Gaelic for Church of the Virgin Mary. The existing church was built in 1785 and sits well back from the rest of the village. I then waited in the bus to Kildonan. As the road swings into the village, the islands of Ailsa Craig and Plada come into view. For accommodation we have the impressive Kildonan Hotel. It's now the only hotel in the village. Kildonan is an attractive village, strung out along a beautiful curved bay. At one time, the village was little more than a handful of clachans. It's now quite a substantial little settlement. Nearby we find a very unusual war memorial, a plaque fixed onto a large rock at the roadside. I had noticed a picture of this area in a walking book of Arran, and before long I came across the view I was looking for, where a wonderful waterfall tumbles over a rocky cliff face and plunges into a small stand of trees. I stopped at the shorefront bus stop. This is a beautiful spot to sit and listen to the bird song and just let the time slip by. My next stop was Whiting Bay, a few miles further on. I headed up the twisting, winding, zigzag track to reach the chambered cairns known as the Giants' Graves. They date back 4,000 to 5,000 years. They now have no roofs and lie in ruins. The views from here were magnificent. It was a wonderful atmospheric place. It was a lot more overcast now, but it wasn't cold. Whiting Bay is in two distinct parts, a long straggling village. There are plenty of hotels and bed and breakfasts at this end. I soon came to the little row of shops that is lined along the coastal side of the road. Gradually, Whiting Bay has expanded from the shore road. I reached the signpost pointing to the Glenashdale Falls. The path keeps climbing, crossing mossy fern-edged gullies and the occasional wooden footbridge. Then the upper falls come into view. There's an excellent viewing platform above the falls. Considering the long dry spring we had, the waterfall was still very impressive. The track leads onto a metalled road above Whiting Bay. I got off the bus on the high road just above the village of Lamlash. This is a sensational view. Holy Isle sits on the other side of the bay. Lamlash is probably the most attractive of all the Arran villages. I made my way down to the Holy Isle ferry and was soon on my way. Slowly the little boat pulled away from the jetty and we headed out into the bay. There's an absolutely stunning view of the east part of the village from here. The ferry trip was worthwhile for the views alone. The 8 ornamental features that are encountered as you step off the jetty are called stupas, a symbol of the enlightened mind of the Buddha. The island has a population of soy sheep. There's a waymarked walk to the south of the island by the 1,000-foot summit, but I didn't have enough time, and soon we were on our way. We soon left the island behind, and the summit of the road that heads to Lamlash, and I headed up the forestry track, and soon Holy Isle appeared from behind the conifers. I came to a kind of junction with an interpretation board, showing you what was there and where to go. This steep, narrow track gave a good view northwards towards the mountains at the other side of Brodick Bay. The track continued down into a stand of trees. A signpost points out the way back to Brodick by the hamlet of Corrie, now by a wider cart track. I soon arrived at the main road and made my way back down to the quayside in Brodick. Well, our tour of Arran has come to an end. Here you're confronted by the most rugged, brutal and breathtaking scenery, almost as impressive as the cooling of sky. Arran has almost everything Scotland has to offer, condensed in one small island. Wonderful villages, castles, ancient monuments and stunning scenery. It even has its own island in Holy Isle. I headed down to the jetty. As the ropes were hauled back onto the boat, the large Calmac ferry eased away from the quayside. As passengers waved to their relatives and friends, the ferry swung round to head back into the Clyde. And as the passengers sat reminiscing in the warm evening sun, the island gradually drifted into the sunset. I too sat with my memories, but I was also planning my next trip to this fascinating and beautiful island.